Hello everyone. I'm going to do a little bit of a demo today about squaring up half square triangles with different gadgets. So we're going to do one with just a regular square ruler. Also, we're going to use the Block Lock ruler and the Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers. And finally, the fourth tool is going to be a Stripology ruler. So we're going to try each of those and talk a little bit about pros and cons of each. Honestly, I think that it really depends on how your brain works. One of these tools might work better for you than somebody else, and that's probably just because of the way you think, and that's just okay. So I'll show you all four, and we'll try to keep Sunny quiet so that you can hear. All right, here we go. Okay, my first method is going to be using just a regular square ruler, and that can be a ruler of any size, depending on the size of your half square triangle. I'm going to be trimming this one to 3.5 inches. This particular ruler is 4.5 inches, so that's pretty handy for me. And the ruler the half square triangle finished out at about 3 3/4 inches. So I've got about 1/4 inch that I'm going to be trimming off. So I'm going to line up that diagonal line with my seam. And I'm just going to trim off a little bit of each of these two sides. And now I'm going to turn my half square triangle and make the other two cuts. Now, I do have a rotating mat here, and that's helpful sometimes, especially if you're doing a bunch of them. You can just kind of rotate that around. So now I'm going to line this up and trim to 3.5 inches. Which is going to be right there. Again, I'm lining up my diagonal line and the sidelines. Now, one of the things that happens with this method sometimes is your ruler can kind of wobble on that seam. So there's a little bit of bulk there, and that can cause a little bit of an issue, which is why the next ruler was invented. So I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so next we're going to use the Block Lock ruler. And the thing that's unique about this one that's really kind of cool is it has this little ridge in the back, and that can line right up with your seam. So you don't have that situation where the ruler rocks over the seam. Also, just an FYI, if you have pressed your half square triangle to the darker fabric, then you can put the logo on the light colored fabric. That's how I kind of always remember which one to put it on. If you put it on the wrong way, it is it'll come out uneven. So it needs to be this way. And you can just feel it. It locks right up next to that seam. So that is kind of handy. And then once again, we'll just trim off a little bit on either side. I'm going to turn this a little bit. And then you can just kind of slide that around, and it'll move the half square triangle with you. Let me get that back in the camera here. And now I'm going to, for my last two cuts, line these up on that 3.5 inch line, and I'm tied up against the seam in the middle, and make my last two cuts. And I have another nice half square triangle. So kind of an advantage there is we don't have that seam wobble. We've still got two nicely trimmed half square triangles. So it sort of depends on which you like the best of those two. Now, next we're going to look at the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer. Okay, the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer, there are two of them actually. One is 1/2 inch, which is trimmer A. You'll see 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, so on. And trimmer B has the even inches. I don't know if you can see that through there. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 inches. So I'm going to use the trimmer A, which has the 3.5 inch line, which is what I'm wanting. And this one works different. With this one, you don't open your half square triangle ahead of time. You leave it as this triangle. And we're going to line it up with the seam line here. So you get your 3.5 inch line, and that lines up with your seam. And then we're just going to make 2 cuts instead of 4. That one and that one. And there are these little divots in the side, and if you go ahead and run your rotary cutter in those little spaces, you will take off those dog ears that happen. Looks like I didn't get that cut quite. So after you cut, and you only have those 2 cuts, which is nice, that kind of goes faster, then you'll open this and press it. So I've never had a problem with that, but I kind of feel like one of the disadvantages of this could possibly be that because you're pressing this after you cut, it's possible you could distort your half square triangle a little bit. So it would just be really important to carefully peel that back, maybe finger press it before you put the iron on. Be careful not to go back and forth, but just press it so it's nice and flat and stays square. Okay, our last method is going to be the Stripology ruler, and I have the Stripology Squared Mini here. Probably the hardest thing about this one is getting used to the lines and where they are and what color they are. They're white and black, and you have dotted lines that do your diagonals. So in this case, I'm looking for a 3.5 inch square. So the 3.5 is going to be white lines here, and then black lines across the top and down the side. And if I get that squared up, I'm going to be able to see, make sure that's in the camera, that I can get that diagonal line right on the seam. So I'm getting that at 3.5. And that diagonal seam. This one messes with my eyes just a little bit, but then once you get it all lined up, and I think if I were going to do hundreds of half square triangles using this, I'd probably put a little tape on it or something to get me in the right spot. But anyway, so I'm going to trim on each side. Instead of going across the side and at the top, this time I'm going to be doing both sides. And then I'm going to turn it and do the same thing again. Find my 3.5, my center line. And there we go. So we have 4 beautiful half square triangles that are all trimmed up looking good, so just pick the one that works the best with your brain.